Hi everyone, it's Gemma again, aka Jam Jar Sews. I'm excited today to be doing another video for Bombay Stores Fabric. So the last video I did was making a gorgeous shift dress for my mum out of this lovely batik fabric from Bombay Stores Fabrics. And today I want to show you a project that I'm going to use up some of the leftover material. Because whenever I make a dress, I tend to order a bit more fabric than I need just to make sure. So I'm going to be showing you today how to make a makeup bag, and I really like doing this with my leftover fabric. I find that they're really easy to make and they make really great gifts for friends and family. So I'm going to make my mum a lovely matching makeup bag for her dress. For this makeup bag project, I'm going to be not using a pattern, but I'm going to be using a combination of sort of online and magazine tutorials that I've looked at over the years. So you need fabric for your outer makeup bag, and then this is going to be lined. I'm going to use this fabric on the inside and the outside, so I think that will be a really nice look. You also need a zip, just a regular zip, and I'm using an 11-inch zip for this project. And I'm going to take you through sort of drafting up the pattern pieces we're going to use and then sewing it all together. Okay, so as I said, the first thing I'm going to work on is making the pattern pieces. I'm actually going to use a makeup bag that I've made previously to kind of help me do this, to remind me what shape it needs to be. So to do this, I'm just going to grab a ruler, a pencil, and I've got pattern paper with grid squares on because I find that really helps me with designing my patterns, but feel free to use any type of paper that you like. So let's get started. So before I get started actually cutting the pieces out, I've drawn up here a little sketch of what shape the pattern piece needs to be. So when we're going to sew it together, the zip's going to go here, these are your side seams, and then we have the notches here, and that basically helps to get a nice flat bottom on the corner like we have here. I've got my zip here, which is going to help me define the length of that top edge. Normally I'd probably add a bit of allowance either side of the zip, but for this makeup bag I think that would make it too big. So I'm not going to do that, I'm just going to use the almost exact length of the zip tape, and then I'll show you how I deal with that when I sew it all together. So for me that's going to be 28 centimeters for this top edge here. I'm then going to do my side edge. So I'm going to kind of eyeball that depending on how I want it to be proportioned. I'm going to do a 14 centimeter diagonal line. The steepness of the angle is up to you. I've gone for quite a gentle one, just 2 centimeters across. I'm then going to draw in my notches, and I'm going to do 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters. I'm going to draw those same lines on the other side, and then I'm going to connect the two sides using the bottom edge down here. Happy with my pattern piece, I've kind of gone over the lines more clearly, and I've just marked it up to show you that the top edge here is 28 centimeters, my side edges are 14 centimeters, my notches are 3 centimeters by 3 centimeters, and then this bottom edge is 26 centimeters. Okay, so the next pattern piece I'm going to make is my last one, and it's just a zip tab, which basically we stitch over the end of the zip and it just encloses the raw edges of the zip. I'm going to do a rectangle 5 centimeters by 12 centimeters for those pieces, and then I will just cut that out. My main pattern piece on the right there and my zip end piece, I'm going to cut out 4 of the main pattern piece from my fabric because I'm using the same fabric for the outer bag and the lining, and then I'm just going to cut out 2 zip tabs. Okay, so now I've cut out my pieces, I'm going to do my first construction step. So starting with these zip tabs, I've got them both here. They were cut out as rectangles like that, but I've just pressed them in half, and then I'm going to line up that folded edge with the end of the zip head there. So I'm just going to place that there, I'm going to pin it on, and then I tend to do 2 lines of stitching very close together just to secure that. Then I'm going to grab my main pattern piece, and my kind of objective is that I want the zip to end up in the center, so I want there to be an even amount of fabric on either end of the zip. As I said, this zip's a bit longer than the ones I'm normally working with, so I'm not going to place it here aligning with the metal end of the zip, but I'm going to move it in a bit, making sure that it's central. Okay, so I'm here at my sewing machine. As I've mentioned in a previous video, at my sewing machine I really like to keep next to me a little pair of scissors to cut off loose threads and a little pot, again to keep my loose threads and scraps in. So the first thing I'm going to do is sew these zip tabs onto my zip, and I am going to use a zip foot to do this, just to make sure that I don't damage my normal presser foot or my needle. And as you can see, the zip tab is now firmly attached by those 2 lines of stitching. So I will now do that on the other end. And so I've sewn those 2 lines of stitching on either side, and I've trimmed it down so the tabs are the same width. And so the next thing we're going to do is start attaching our zip to the front of our makeup bag. So now, as I'm working with the same fabric for the front and the front and the back of the bag and the lining pieces, I don't have to be quite as careful, but just make sure that you're definitely attaching a front piece and not a lining piece for this first step. One thing you can do as well is, if you're worried that your zip's not going to be centered, you can find the center of this piece, find the center of your zip, and then you can use that to align your pieces. So we've got our front piece here right side up, we've got our zip with its tabs sewn in here, and all we're going to do is flip the zip over so the teeth are facing down and align that with that top edge there. So making sure that your zip is nice and central. I'm just going to then pin all the way along this top edge. So you can see if I just flip that, when the bag is done, you'll have this nice folded edge here, and then you'll have your 2 zip tabs here. So I'm at my machine, I'm ready to sew my zip into my front piece. So one thing that's important to note here is that you need to make sure that you don't sew too close to the teeth, because you need to be able to obviously open and close the zip. So now we've got our zip sewn onto our front piece like that. We flip the zip back over, and we've got the right side of the front facing towards us. And then we take our lining piece, and we want this right sides together, and we're just going to sandwich that zip in between your lining piece here and your front of your makeup bag. So I've sewn in the front side of my makeup bag and my lining piece to the zip. I'm just going to go through the same process for the other side. My back piece here, I've got my sewn together bit already here, and as we just did with the front piece, I'm going to turn that zip around so the teeth are facing down on the right side of my back piece. So now I've got my front piece and my back piece sewn in. You can see that flips out like that, and that's what we're going to see from the outside. Got my front lining sewn in, but not my back lining yet. So just going to do that exactly the same way as the front lining. You've got the back of the zip tape facing towards you. You're going to take your back lining part, and now you've got quite a few layers, so now you're going to sandwich your zip in between the back lining and the back piece of the bag. Okay, so now we've got all of our pieces sewn to our zip, and it looks like this. So that's the outside of our makeup bag, which looks, I think, pretty gorgeous. I really love this fabric from Bombay Stores Fabric, and I can't wait to try out more of their batik range because it's beautiful. And then that's the inside. So really important step before we do the next bit, which is going to be sewing the side seams, is we need to unzip the zip halfway, because if we don't do that, we're not going to be able to turn it the right way out. So what we're going to do first is we're going to pin our front piece and our back piece together like that. And as you can see, I've sort of folded my zip tapes down so they're facing towards the lining, because then they'll be facing in the right direction. And all we're going to do is probably use a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and just stitch down there, and do stitch through your zip tab ends. Just make sure you don't stitch over your zip head. The side seam's done, and now on my front and back piece, and I can tell which way that is by looking at the zip and which way the zip's facing, or if you're using different fabric, it's a lot easier to tell. So yes, this is my front and back piece. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stitch the whole of this bottom edge, and then on my lining pieces I am going to stitch this bottom edge, but I'm going to leave a gap, and we need that gap to be able to turn it inside out. There's not a specific size that gap needs to be, but don't make it too small, because otherwise it's hard to turn the bag inside out. We should have our side seams sewn on the lining parts and the front and the back of the bag. We should have the lining piece with a bottom seam but with a gap in it so that you can turn your bag inside out. Having said, don't make the gap too small. I fear I may now have done that, but they should be fine. And then we've also got the fully sewn bottom seam on the front and back pieces here, just down here. So my next step is I'm going to trim these edges just down with pinking shears. As I said, you can finish it any way you like. One quick thing to note when you're trimming your edges is I actually quite like to leave some extra fabric around where that gap is rather than trimming it down, because I find that when you come to the end and you're hand stitching that bit closed, it's just a lot easier. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to box these corners. So we've got this notch here. What I'm going to do is face around this way. I'm going to pull apart those two pieces of fabric, and I'm going to fold them together like that so that the raw edges are matching. I'm going to then fold over my seams so they lie nice and flat as well, and with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance I'm just going to do a line of stitching. That looks like in the machine. So I've got all my edges pinned down there. I'm just going to pop that in using 5/8 of a seam allowance. Try and get it to lie as nice and flat as possible. Okay, now we've got all of our seams that need to be sewn. We've trimmed our edges, we've trimmed off all our stray threads, and now it's the exciting part because we get to turn it inside out. So you're going to turn it through this gap you've got in the lining. It should come through fairly easily if you haven't made that gap too small. So you bring it through the lining first, and then you're going to turn it again to get your zip facing the right way out, and then you need to get your lining to the inside. So because you've got that hole in your lining, you can go through that to sort of poke out your box corners, poke out around your zip. So that's what I'm doing now. And then once you've got that sorted, I'm going to give it a little fluffy fluff. Very technical. You then have your beautiful finished makeup bag to put all your lovely things in or gift to a friend or family. As I said, I think these are great gifts. They're easy to make and they're a really good way to use up scrap fabric. I'm really happy with the way this looks. I love this print so much anyway, and I think it looks really nice with the pink zip. You can see the linings all nice and neat in there. Would look great with a contrast lining as well. I've got my box corners in, so it will sit like, it's a bit hard to get it to sit when it's empty, but it will sit like that. Obviously you don't have to use it for makeup. You could use it as a pencil case, you could use it to store loads of things. I'm happy with the way everything is sitting, and my zip is working properly, so that's great. My last step is just going to be to hand sew that gap in the lining, so I'm going to do that using slip stitch. But I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you're happy with your makeup bag. A big thank you to Bombay Stores Fabric again for providing the materials for this project. I'm really happy with the way it looks. Thanks for watching everybody, bye!